Welcome back to the Tour Today show. My name is Steve Fleck. Every day there's racing at the Tour. We will talk about the highs and the lows, the thrills and the spills, the tragedies and the triumphs at the Tour, aka La Grande Boucle. On each episode of the Tour Today, I will have a special guest on the show with me. Today, I'm pleased to have with me the founder of Canadian Cyclists and one of the top professional photographers in cycling, having worked at many national championships, World Cups, and Olympic Games. Welcome, Rob Jones.
Hi, Steve.
Great to see you, Rob. Now, you used to live in Paris, Ontario. Do you still live in Paris?
We still live in Paris.
A famous French city, but you live in the Paris, Ontario.
That's right. Every time I go through Paris, France, and go through immigration, they always get a chuckle when they see the town on my passport.
Now, Paris, Ontario is the famous start, or départ en français, for a famous bike race in Canada, on Ontario, one of which you are intimately involved with in the early days, the annual spring classic called ParistoAncaster, modeled a little bit after Paris-Roubaix in Europe.
Yes, actually, I, along with Chris Kiriakopoulos and Tim Farrar, one of the founders and organizers of ParistoAncaster, we rode year zero. The year before it started, we actually rode it in the fall in the snow to make sure that the course worked.
Yeah, well, work sometimes it does work.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes against you. It's a brutal 70 kilometers from Paris to Ancaster, which is just outside of Hamilton, Ontario. And Hamilton is a city about 45 minutes to the west of Toronto, for those trying to get their geographical bearings. But look that up, Paris to Ancaster, or affectionately as we call it, P2A. It is a famous race. Over 3,000 riders usually take the start line every spring. Unfortunately, canceled this year due to the pandemic, but hopefully, fingers crossed, back for 2021. Rob, what a tour. We're not even a week into the 2020 Tour de France, and we've had a little bit of everything. We've had crazy weather, we've had manic sprint stage finishes, we've had an interesting GC battle so far, even though it's early days for that. We've had the first ever and earliest mountaintop finishes that they've ever had in recent tours. It looks a little bit like a Giro d'Italia, with all these crazy stages in the opening week. We've even had some controversy with Julian Alaphilippe losing the yellow jersey overnight last night on a technical foul. Commissaires called him for picking up a bottle within 20 kilometers from, I think it was a team car, maybe a soigneur on the side of the road, and he was given a 20-second penalty, which took him out of yellow and put Adam Yates from the Mitchelton Scott team into yellow. Your thoughts on this wild and woolly sort of opening week that isn't even done yet?
Yeah, as you said, I mean, it is unique. I mean, it's partially the time of year. You've also got the riders. They've usually had the whole spring classic season and the Giro and Dauphiné and Tour de Suisse and so on to sort of build towards the Tour. They didn't have any of that this year. So you've got riders that are not quite sure of their legs. The teams are one rider less, only 8 riders, and that one rider can make a difference in controlling things. You've got Froome and Geraint Thomas not there with Ineos. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. And then the other thing, which I think needs to be considered, is COVID could shut this down at any point. And the organization has said if they can go 10 stages, then whoever's leading after 10 stages, if they get shut down, will win the Tour de France. So I think that may count partly in the calculations of some of this early racing more aggressively by the GC riders. See if we can get the yellow jersey and hold it through those 10 days, especially with France seeing skyrocketing cases of COVID right now.
I must admit to you, Rob, I mean, they've been saying that there would be no people on the side of the road. And we saw today, like on the climb to the final finish, I was actually surprised on the route up to Mount Aiguille, the finish today, the numbers of fans that had gathered on the side of the road. That seemed a little surprising to me. I was expecting to see almost zero, but to see throngs of people. And they kept saying that there wouldn't be anyone, on the climb. So I guess that's what my expectation was.
No, it's the tour. People will come out for it. I mean, from what I could tell, a significant number we're wearing masks, but
Hmm.
again, as always, there are some foolishly who are not. But especially in the mountain stages, they're going to be out to watch it. And I know the riders have been expressing concern about that. I mean, I'm still 50-50 on the idea of whether the tour will make it all the way to Paris or whether something will happen to affect that. But so far, cycling, like the NBA and like the NHL, has been fairly successful with its relaunch.
Well, I spoke yesterday as well. There's the business side of this too, Rob, and you must be aware of that as well. This is a big business, and it's big business for the teams. It's big business for the sponsors. And I talked to Peter Abram yesterday. He's one of the leading marketers, like in endurance sports, and we were talking about the fact that a lot of the lower ranked teams, if the tour didn't happen, if the Tour de France didn't happen, and those exposure opportunities for the riders didn't happen on TV, on podiums, et cetera, which are linked back to their bonuses and sponsor
Mhm.
payouts, they would probably go bankrupt by the end of the year.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, they rely on the tour more than almost anything, which is why you see these people going out on long breakaways, just getting that TV time out there. That rarely succeed, but sometimes, like today, they do succeed. But yes, I mean, it is a big part of the sport. I mean, cycling definitely is not a wealthy sport, unlike say soccer or baseball or basketball and so on. And this, I think, has proportionally hit cycling much harder because they don't have the revenue from a stadium, from spectators coming in, that sort of thing. So it's been a problem. We're already seeing like CCC, Pro Tour team. It's hard to say whether they'll survive the end of this year.
Yeah. Speaking of breakaways, it was a breakaway that succeeded today, which was great to see. Alexei Lutsenko from the Astana team and a Kazakhstani rider himself, the Kazakhstan champion, as a matter of fact, survived from an early breakaway that had a lot of firepower in it, and there was talk early on that it might go all the way to the line. Lutsenko was the sole survivor and managed to get to the line before the pack came upon him, but he looked pretty impressive. Very, easy in the breakaway, and then made a good move on the penultimate climb to distance himself from his breakaway companions.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember, I mean, he's the 2012 under 23 world champion.
Yep.
I mean, I remember watching him win there. And he's won the Tour of the Arctic, I believe. He's won a stage of the Vuelta. He's not an unknown rider, but it was an extremely impressive ride. I mean, he sat it, as you said, it was quite a bit of firepower in that group with Van Avermaet in there and Bosenhagen and Oss. I mean, there was a significant number of good riders, and he was clearly the strongest when Niels Paulus attacked, dropping Van Avermaet and Nicolas Roche. Then Lutsenko went with him, and as soon as Paulus started to falter, I mean, he had an impressive ride himself, finished second, but he's still a pretty young rider. Then Lutsenko just went away, and the impressive thing is, even the peloton powered by Ineos at the front, they didn't take back any time on him. He maintained his gap the whole way to the finish.
Yeah, I think it got out to 5 or 6 minutes at its maximum when the full complement of the breakaway was there. But then it only got to about 3 minutes, and then Lutsenko was, as you had mentioned, Rob, able to hold that gap, that 3-minute gap, even with Ineos on the front trying to go after it. He was able to hold that at 3 minutes all the way to the line. You mentioned young Niels Paulus riding for the EF First Education team. What a day for him! He was in there with some very experienced and strong riders. Here he is in his first, Tour de France, his first time riding at this level, his birthday today. And he really made the move that lit up the group and ended up, the group sort of disintegrating into, various small groups.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing a little bit of the excitement and inexperience I mean, he would have been better to let Lysenko just set the pace and stay with him, because he clearly had the climbing legs, but he lit it up hard, dropping Roche and Van Avermaet. And then, I mean, Lysenko didn't attack. He just kept setting the pace, and Paulus clearly had blown himself with his attack. And I think that might be some youthful inexperience. I mean, and then he managed to get back on Van Avermaet's wheel, but then again, he then set the pace for Van Avermaet all the way up that final climb, and then Van Avermaet jumped him in the final 500 meters. So, I mean, he certainly had a very impressive ride, but I mean, I think there's things that he is definitely going to learn from this.
Yeah. You certainly saw the lack of experience there with the some of the poor choices you had noted. Quick thoughts on the Alaphilippe situation?
I mean, taking a bottle in the last 20 kilometers, it's pretty clear. I mean, even Lefebvre, the head of Quickstep, said it was a stupid on our part. So, I mean, he didn't argue it. It's automatic. You take your lumps. It's sort of foolish to happen. They said the team director said it. Well, the 20K mark is when they were going 70 kilometers an hour, so we went somewhere where it was safer. It's like, yeah, unfortunately, that argument is not going to work. It's really a case of you should have known better. And I don't think it's going to make much difference at this point. He took back a few seconds at the finish just to sort of show them that he's still there. But he's still in that group of main contenders that are still within less than 20 seconds. So it's not, in the overall scheme of things, it's not to make much difference. Obviously, for the French fans, it's probably a little more drama, because they obviously love to see a Frenchman in the yellow jersey.
I noticed that all the soigneurs today were standing right inside. Today it was 15 kilometers to go for the last feed allowed. And I noticed all the soigneurs that were standing right inside the 15 a kilometer to go gantry to make sure that there was no illegal hand-ups and no more disqualifications on that regard.
And commissaires will do that sometimes in a stage race. If they notice things are starting to get a little loosey-goosey, then they'll make a point of penalizing somebody, and everybody sort of pays a little more attention after that. And sometimes it needs to be done.
Before we move on to look at tomorrow's stage 7, quick thoughts on some other news that came down overnight, which was the move for the UCI to move the UCI Road World Championships from Switzerland, which said, no, we don't want to host it. And they very quickly found a new home, with the UCI working like extraordinarily fast for them as an organization to Imola, Italy. They wanted to find a course and a parcours that was very similar to the hilly layout they had in Switzerland originally for the World Championships. It's only going to be for elites and pros, no other categories. So just elite and pro women and men will contest the World Championships. Rob, thoughts on this late and bit of a wild move by the UCI to move it so quickly, and it's just coming up at the end of the tour?
Well, I mean, you mentioned earlier about the financial side of things. The UCI exists on sanctioning fees and revenue. The World Championships is one of the few events that's actually their event. They get the TV revenue. They get a big sanction fee from whoever puts it on in the millions of euros. They count on that, and they haven't been getting a lot of revenue this year. I mean, I talk to people I know who work for the UCI. There's a lot of people being laid off. There's a lot of people working part-time and from their homes. And the UCI and the Road Worlds is their major moneymaker every year. And especially with the Olympics not happening this year, they normally get millions of euros from the IOC as one of the international federations, so they didn't get that either. So this was a critical event for them, and they were going to do everything they could to save it. And they got 4 bids, I guess is the best way to put it, 1 in France and 3 in Italy. I mean, if they're going to save anything, it was going to be the elites, because that's the one that brings in the TV revenue. That's the one that everybody wants to watch. I mean, it came out, I'm busy scrambling to put together my flights now because I have to go over for that, and then the Mountain Bike World Cup final in the Czech right after the Road World's finish, and then from there straight down to Austria for the Mountain Bike Worlds, assuming everything continues to go. So it's a bit of a scramble for everybody right now.
Well, we'll get to that photographic scramble and what it means for pro photographers in a second, Rob. But let's quickly review tomorrow's stage 7. Kind of lumpy through the early going in the mid part, but then it's all downhill and flat to the finish. So it potentially looks like one for the sprinters. The GC riders, again, Adam Yates in post-race comments was saying, we just want to get through this. No excitement tomorrow, saving the legs for the Pyrenees. Your thoughts?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, no one's going to be able to make a clear difference in the GC tomorrow, especially with the flat at the end. Today potentially could have because of the climbing at the end, but tomorrow it's going to be a case of, I think there'll be the sort of traditional Tour de France long breakaway. It may get out to 8 or 10 or 12 minutes. And then the teams, the GC teams, and then towards the end, the sprinters teams will shut it down. I think that, like always, when you get a breakaway like that, there's always a chance that they might stay away, which is why they do it. But I'm going to be surprised if it's anything other than a sprint tomorrow.
I mean, often you start to see at this stage of the tour, when we're starting to get a little bit deeper in, there's guys that are so low down in the GC that, I mean, they can get 10, 15 minutes up in a break and no one really cares. So they let them go. But those sprinters, they want to win the stage, particularly in that green jersey competition. And before we move on, let's just quickly review the jerseys. No real changes. Yates will stay in yellow. Sam Bennett still in green. Taj Pogacar, the young Slovenian rider, is still in white for the best young rider. Benoit Cosnefroy, another U23 former road world champion, Rob. He is still the KOM. A couple of KOM points came up today. And then EF Pro Cycling is leading the team competition. So that's nice to see the American team in the lead there. So let's start.
Pogacar had a little bit of a fright because he got flat at a very bad time.
Yeah, that flat.
Luckily, he was able to get back, and the team sent someone back to bring him back up again.
Yeah, no, he's one to watch. He's only 21 years old, and the fitness and patience and prowess that I've seen from that young rider in less than a week of the tour has been extraordinary. So we'll keep an eye on him. He could factor, overall in the GC. Let's shift to photography, Rob, now, which is your craft and what you're known for. What is the place of still photography with so much TV, so much video, so much streaming content these days? What is the place of still photography in professional sports and in professional cycling?
I mean, it has to be said that it has been hit by all the video and the streaming online. That it's been impacted by the on a financial sense by the demand, but there's still a strong place for it. I mean, people still look at it in magazines. It still gets used in ads. It still appears in newspapers. It still captures a moment. Which you don't get when you're watching something in video, which sort of something flashes by, and then maybe they come back and they do it in slow motion, but it can't capture that moment of when actually something took place and what the emotion is and just everything else that's going on around it.
I know some of those iconic images of, he's now retired, but Graham Watson, from years ago, or Cor Voss. Cor Voss is still shooting even to this day, from the Grand Tours, from the famous one-day races. I mean, those images, they just capture a moment in time, and it's kind of frozen, and you remember it forever. And it kind of highlights that singular moment when an athlete attacked or came across a finish line. And the video, you're right, the video doesn't really do that.
Well, if you've seen on Canadian Cyclist, we've been doing, because we've been racing, we've been doing a race revisit series where we've been talking to Canadian riders about past events, and we just recently spoke with Jeff Kabush about his One World Cup mountain bike win in Bromont, and we put up the photo of him crossing the finish line covered in mud.
Yeah,
You couldn't
saw
even
that.
tell he was a national champion.
Yeah.
Right. Those sorts of things you don't get in video.
No. What's a typical day like for a photographer that's at a grand tour? Just walk us quickly through, what the day looks like.
Well, I mean, you have to get there early just to get parking. Actually, I should back up. It depends on whether you're on a motorcycle or you're not. If you're on a motorcycle, then you can come in a little later. You come in with your driver, and then you basically you generally try to get photos before the start of the race. This year is different because you can't go into the pits and take all those photos, right? Which normally they do, all the pre-race stuff. And then you get ready for the race to start, and basically, depending on how the stage goes, you develop your plan on the fly. Now I'm going to go aside for a second to if you're not on a moto, which in a grand tour is almost everybody, you do have access to the course. Generally, you will try and get 2, maybe 3 spots if you can. You'll study it well in advance, the course, especially if it's one that you've done before, and you'll pick out the spots where you think are going to be good. If it's a mountain stage, you want something with a good background, something hopefully where there's already been some separation, and there's a small group or something. You need to get up there early because they do close the roads down, even to the press. Unless you're early enough, especially the Tour de France. The gendarmes are notorious for how draconic they can be about shutting things down and basically denying anybody entry. And then you find your spot. If it's on a mountain, you have to maybe drive a couple of kilometers down the road to find a place to wedge your car in and then walk back down because there's so many fans there. Then you wait, and you might have to wait an hour or an hour and a half. You'll take photos of the fans who are running around, who will often go photo, and then pose for you. If you're lucky, they'll share a glass of wine with you, or something, and then you just hang out and you wait, and then you've got maybe 3 or 4 minutes of high excitement and drama where you're trying to get as many photos as you can of all the important riders and the critical elements. You still have to wait until the very last rider has gone by before you can get in your car again, which could be, depending on where it is in the stage, could be 30 minutes. And then you'll creep along behind the last rider until you get off the course and then race to your next spot, where hopefully you'll be there long enough in advance that you can jump in again and get another photo.
Now, I'm assuming... Go ahead. Yep.
Or you'll go to the finish line, which means you have to leave really, really early because they close that even earlier.
Now, I'm guessing you have to have a pretty close relationship with your moto driver, and either you or the moto driver probably needs to have a super intimate knowledge of the roads and the back roads, and maybe how to get from A to B, quicker than the riders could, just so that you could be well positioned. Is that sort of an accurate assessment of that?
If you're a moto driver, you have a lot more freedom to move around because depending on how the race is going, you can pass them. So you can stop and take a nice posed scenic photo and then get back on, and then depending where they are in the race, you'll be allowed to sneak by them by the regulator and then go up somewhere else, or you'll be able to drop back from in front of them and get some photos. Yes. And then pull away again. It's sort of, again, it depends on how the race is going. If there's a tremendous number of attacks or the conditions are sketchy, then you're going to be restricted more. They're going to stop you from doing things because of danger of something going wrong. But yeah, it's a good moto driver is invaluable. If you have one who you've worked with a lot, and I'll give the example of Robert Bruchot from Quebec, who I first worked with him when he started. He had never done it before. We did the Tour de Beauce, and then we did the Tour de Beauce a few more times. And then the GP Quebec and Montreal started, and he came out. He lives in Quebec, and he came out for that, and he was my driver. And after about 8 or 9 years, we got really good. And then the organization stole him off me to give him to a TV guy because he got good. So it's, but with him, he knew what I wanted. He
Yes.
knew how close he could get.
Yep.
Without getting into trouble with the officials or affecting the race, which is the
Sure.
worst thing you can do.
Right. And
A good moto driver is certainly key.
Anthony McCrossan on the Flow Bikes coverage that we're seeing in Canada, he was talking about the importance of the regulator. You just mentioned the regulator, and that's an important person in the caravan of cars and riders, making sure everyone's going the right way at the right time and who's in and who's not allowed. And that's what he was saying. That's one of the most important jobs, so that doesn't happen. So that photographers on be they video or still photographers are not impacting the race and what's going on with the riders on the road.
Yeah, I mean, there's a flow to a race.
Mm-hmm.
There's a rhythm, and if the regulator gets it right and the officials get it right, then everything works smoothly and everyone can do their job. I can get in and get my photos and get out of the way.
Yes.
The TV guys can do theirs. And if it's not working very well, then it gets very stressful and there's a lot of problems. And I've had a couple of times where that's happened, where I've just said to my driver, you know what, let's just get out of here. Let's just go down the road and find somewhere to stop and take a nice scenic and let everybody sort themselves out. Otherwise, someone's going to get angry. And to be honest, one of the first ones who are going to be booted out are going to be the photo motos. They're going to say, you know what, we got problems. You guys all leave. So if you get out of their way and not cause problems, then they're more likely to be more favorable to you in the future. And it is a small group who gets to know each other, and as long as you don't become known as a troublemaker, then you will get cut some slack.
Mm-hmm. What's the relationship if you're on a moto? You're kind of intimate and intermingled with the riders a lot. What's the relationship like with them? I know with the video guys, they're sometimes waving or thumbs up or smiling or mugging to the camera. What's the relationship with the riders like?
It depends on how stressful things are. Right. If they're in the middle, there's a lot of attacking and so on. For example, if you stop to take a photo and then you are trying to repass the peloton to get out in front to do something, and you're given permission by the regulator to go by, and all of a sudden an attack happens, and it's like a school of fish, and they come across the road, and all of a sudden you're in the middle of the pack.
Right.
Well, I'm still taking photos, and some of the riders are fine with it. Another one starts cursing and swearing at you because they're really stressed out. Yeah. But I mean, for the most part, they know that we have a job to do. As long as we don't do things to screw it up for them, then they're gonna flow around us and they're gonna work with us. And oftentimes they will mug for the camera. I mean, one of my things, especially when I'm doing something like nationals, is because I've been doing it long enough. I'll get the riders, they'll look and they'll grin at me, and it's like, don't do that. I'm trying to get a photo of you racing. I want a race face. I don't want you smiling at me.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, Rob, everything is different about this tour. The parkour, the timing. I noticed one of the Velo News photographers, I don't know if he's a staff Velo News photographer, but he was mentioning that even the lighting, is different. And particularly those first couple of stages that started and finished in Nice, they were very late starts, and the light for the finish was almost magical that one day. It was very low in the sky. So it's very different than it would have been, had the tour been running, back in July when we're closer to the summer solstice. And as you know, as a photographer, lighting is everything. So what are some of the differences with the different kind of light that, photographers are facing, at the tour this year with its later start?
Well, you're not getting that really harsh summer lighting. I mean, a lot of people will have seen from the tour. You see it more with TV because the photographers can set up their shots a bit better and mess around with aperture and exposure and stuff. But with TV, you'll often see it'll look blown out for a while. It's like white before the camera corrects. What you're getting a warmer light. It's not going to be as harsh as it would be in the high summer. I think it more analogous to, when I shoot down in the Southern Hemisphere in like South Africa is a good example. And I've been down there for various races. The light down there is fantastic. It's such a warm golden reddish light that you just love to shoot in. And they're getting more of that this year for the Tour. So, I mean, the photographers can certainly adjust because they be shooting this sort of light for the World Championships anyways every year,
right.
and for the Vuelta. But for the Tour, if they're used to having their standard shots and so on, some of that will have changed and they'll have to compensate. If you've been doing a certain race for many years, like we Tour de Beauce, done it 26 or 27 times, then I know a lot of those courses, and I know there are certain places where I like to get a photo because it's sort of an iconic photo. And all of a sudden, if you changed the time of year, well, maybe that photo's not quite as nice anymore. Or maybe the lighting has changed and it's different, and that photo doesn't work. So in some ways it's good because it pushes you out of your comfort zone to go and find something different. So it's an interesting situation.
I'm guessing that once the stage is done, once the race is done, you're back at the finish, the podium has been finished, you've got all your shots from there. I'm guessing
then we start to work.
Then the real work begins. So very quickly,
That's
just to wrap up, what happens then when you get back to the hotel? I'm sure it's not a nice dinner with wine and whatnot. What goes on then?
Well, what generally happens is, so the race finishes, then there's the podium. And then for me, because I also write as well, I then go and find, if there's any Canadians, I go and find them to try and get a quote. And then you get into the press room, and then you have to download all your images. Then you have to go through them, pick out the important ones, do any of your adjustments or resizing and so on. And then they have to get sent out. Now, if you're somebody that works for Getty, then it's great in the sense that, you send them to Getty and they send them out to everybody. If you're somebody like me or Graham Watson or, Luca Bettini or Corvos's team, then you're doing most of that yourself, and we're there late. The joke is often who's going to be the last one in the press room.
Right.
It's often either Casey Gibbs and I, because we work together a lot, or Tim DeWall. It's, we're usually the last ones because we're still busy. We have to do all our work ourselves and then send it out. And it's guaranteed you'll be going out, it'll be dark. And you'll find your car and there'll be nobody else left in the parking lot. And then if you're lucky, you'll find somewhere where you can get some dinner. Since it's France, that's highly unlikely. So you won't get much dinner. I usually pack a sandwich, or maybe you'll find a McDonald's or something. It's not glamorous. And then you
repeat it all the next day for 3 weeks.
And then if you're something like the Tour, you may have to drive 100 kilometers to where you're going to stay before the start of the next stage. It's not like, oh, it's finished, I'm just going to drive over to my hotel. It's like, no, you may have to drive a couple of hours to get to your hotel. It's not as glamorous, as I say to people, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. There's very cool moments, but on the other hand, there's very long days as well.
Well, thank you for sharing all of this with us, Rob. You have been watching the Tour today. My guest today has been top cycling photographer Rob Jones. Thank you, Rob.
Well, thank you, Steve.
My guest tomorrow for Stage 7 of the Tour Today show will be Canadian sales representative for Argon 18 Bicycles, Glenn Innes. I'm Steve Fleck on behalf of the whole team at Endurance Zone TV. Thank you for watching, and we will see you all back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time for the Tour Today show.